Good afternoon, and thank you for joining us on the Daily Support Call. Today we have Maddy and Karen Mocherniak. Welcome to the show, ladies. Happy to have you here.
Thanks for having us.
Yeah, thanks, Marcus.
Yeah, no problem. So why don't you guys introduce yourselves? Karen, tell us a little bit about what you do, who you are.
Okay, I'm a mom of 18-year-old and a 20-year-old. I'm a teacher, social worker, and trying to survive this whole virus situation.
Okay, so let's get right into it then, because you talked about trying to survive. What does that actually look like right now for you and for your family?
Well, this is just the strangest time in our lives. You know, we're trying to cope. We're trying to be in the same house with our kids, not going anywhere. I'm trying to teach online to kids that range from grade 1 all the way up to grade 8. It's all this unknown. All this unknown has just caused a lot of stress and anxiety, and just trying to navigate, the information from the beginning of, how much contact you could have with people, and venturing out. And, I've got teenage kid here who wanted to see her friends. And at the beginning, if their families were quarantined and ours were quarantined, we thought it was okay, but it's been kind of a roller coaster here.
Yeah, I mean, I could see that. It's a story I think we're all going through right now in different ways. So it's the information and the disinformation is what's been fascinating for me. Is on the one hand, for the most part, whether you like our leaders or not, on the provincial level and federal level, they've been stepping up in many ways and putting things into place and doing their best to support. But then there's others who are detractors of that, and they're like, no, they were late to the game. They were told things early on. And, at first I was like, okay, I understand that right now we're all going through an extended quarantine. We're all going through quite literally a grief process of what was to what now is. And I've really netted out that if people need to focus on criticizing someone saying speaking moistly, then then that's up to them. Like, we all are coping with this situation the way we can. But at the end of the day, I'm so grateful to be living in Canada where we live. I mean, our leaders have stepped up. And are they perfect? Of course not. None of them ever are. We aren't. We're all flawed in this human condition, but things are getting done. And sure, maybe there was an example set elsewhere, and maybe we were a little bit late to the game, but again, we're still getting new data every day. We're testing new ideas every day. In my business, I preach that. Test everything. Don't just blindly accept what someone else says. Test it. See if it works for you.
Yeah, we agree. We're so happy to be living in our amazing country. Everybody can criticize somebody of everything. I don't want to waste my time on criticizing. I just want to, thank our Prime Minister and our Premier for the support they're giving us. We're, I think, very fortunate compared to, our next door neighbors, and what they are dealing with, and the leadership. And I'm just thankful where we are.
Well, and even beyond that, I mean, I was reading something the other day that's interesting is at this point for some of the major nations like ourselves and the US, it's not even now about the pandemic and how many deaths there will be and how long it will take to recover. It's more about how many people are going to go bankrupt. So here's an interesting number for both of you. And Maddy, this will give you some perspective on just how blessed we are to have universal health care. To get tested and treated if you're positive for COVID-19, the average cost per citizen in the US is $34,000.
Oh my God.
So I don't know about you guys, but I don't have $34,000 sitting around per family member. to get ourselves out of this. So it's going to get to a point where if the United States doesn't start to flatten that curve that everyone's talking about, that just the death rate alone will become so costly that people will not seek treatment and therefore risk infecting others, while they themselves die because of poverty, more or less. So yeah, I mean, we're only starting to see really the beginning of what could be, and I pray it doesn't go that way, and that, you know, leadership in the U.S. does stand up more and take note. There was a great article about Doug Ford yesterday. You know, not everybody likes him, and not everybody agrees with him, but conclusively they talk about how a crucible of a crisis can forge a great leader, and that more than anyone else in the Western world right now, that man has stood up and made quick, hard decisions. And you have to
Totally
respect
agree.
that.
You know, as a teacher, he was not my top fan with all the
Right.
negotiations that were going on with teachers, and it was rough, you know, in February, and he was not my favorite guy. And I have to tell you, I have totally changed on my thinking of Doug Ford. He is, or has been, a great leader throughout all this, and standing up for his people, and I'm proud of him. And you know, with the whole 3M situation, and how he dealt with it, and no, I can't believe I'm saying this, but like, I'm behind Doug Ford right now. He's really shown great leadership skills.
Well, and see, that to me is wonderful in a way, because, you know, politics for anyone can be as strong as religious beliefs, but to still have that level of openness, even though we all are in a state of fear, a state of uncertainty, of unknown, like you said, to be able to actually see the good that people are accomplishing, regardless of our own skewed view, that's commendable. Now, Maddy, you said you like Doug Ford, and that little smile on your face told me it's because of dollar beers.
No, I thought you were talking about Trudeau at first, because
Okay.
you were talking about a leader, and I was like, well, I liked him at first.
Okay, so what is it you like about Trudeau?
Oh, you know, well, honestly, I don't really know too much about him, but I thought he was very pretty when I was.
Oh my God.
Yeah, no, you know what? You're right up there with Melania Trump and every other woman on the planet. He's a beautiful man. Some people like the beard, some don't. You know, he's a great guy, very charismatic, so you can't knock him that. So you guys talked about some stress going on earlier in the house. Maddy, do you have any stories?
Well, we have just about, I would say, killed each other. It's been, yeah. I honestly can't even describe like how we're all just handling this situation like differently, and like all of our personalities are clashing because we're together 24/7, and it's just been, I don't know, it's been really hard though, especially in our house.
You know, I have to say, especially for her, she's graduating this year. It's, and you mentioned it before, it's this whole grieving process.
Like I lose my like senior year.
Right.
Like I don't have grad, I don't have prom, like I can't see any of my friends anymore, and then we don't even know what's happening with school. Like for my university, like admissions are pushed back, and like in the years possibly pushed back. So
yeah, we are actually, I was talking with a participant yesterday before all this stuff happened, about how, and Karen, I don't know if you guys have thought about this, but how challenging it is right now to be single. Right? Hey, I like you, can't see you. Oh, okay. Even if I do like you and we get through this, how, like, what's the new courting ritual going to be? Do we kiss anymore? Do we finger guns? Hey, I like you, right? Like what are we doing, right? Or is it the Japanese bow, the blow a kiss? Like, we don't know. So you think about, you know, millennials is where this topic went to. They are really getting the short end of the stick at the end of things. Because if you think about anyone under the age of 30, more or less, okay, they went through the collapse in 2008, right? We had the whole market crash then. Then they've got crippling student debt, skyrocketing housing prices, and now they're going through a global pandemic like the world has never seen. And this is what they've known. right? And you know, for the first time, whether you like the whole idea of millennials, you know, a lot of people, a lot of older generations say it about every younger generation, but the millennials really have it rough right now. The interesting thing is they're the ones doing the most to get us through this crisis, which is phenomenal. They've been coming up with new technologies, inventing new ideas, leveraging the tools like Zoom, and getting more reach and more voice and more positivity out there than every other generation combined.
Yeah.
So kudos to you, Maddy. You guys are doing amazing.
And it is, it's what you said. It's a grieving process for the way life was, and trying to adapt and being creative in coping every day. And we all thrive on social relationships and interaction, and you're basically in house arrest.
Yeah.
You know?
Right.
Especially for me, like I'm super social. Like I'm always with my friends and I'm out and about. And like this is something that has been like a huge learning curve for me, especially.
Well, tell me about some of your challenges. Like, give me some specific examples. You said everyone's coping differently. How are you coping, Maddy? What is your mechanism for coping?
So I feel like when it comes to like conflict, especially like in the house, I just feel like I distance myself from everyone, and like I kind of just like to be alone. But then
You caused the conflict.
no, it takes two to fight.
So what you're talking about is really interesting, because we all have different triggers, right? So whether it's frayed emotions, whether it's unintentional or not, there's really three responses that come up from our natural self, and that's fight, flight, or freeze, right? And that's where the real conflict arises. Because let's say, Maddy, let's say a situation suddenly happens. If your go-to is flight and someone else's go-to is fight, I mean, you want that break to reprocess, come back at it when you're ready. But someone who's in a fight mode, they're like, no, it's on. We're going to solve this now. And those two personality types don't really coexist well unless they learn how to have those types of crucial conversations. And really, what the best tools are for that, we teach a course on that. It's called Crucial Conversations. And the whole idea is to separate the facts from the story that we tell ourselves, with the intention of both parties or all parties getting to a pool of shared meaning. So what does that mean? It can mean something as simple as, let's say, a piece of clothing was left on the floor. That's a fact. You both could agree in an objective mind that a piece of clothing was left on the floor. But to Karen, the mom, it might be like, I tell her 1,000 times that she needs to pick up her clothes. She never listens. That lazy girl of mine, always up to no good. And she's putting all of this story into her head. And you might look back at it and go, oh, I didn't even realize I dropped it, right? So two different stories based on the same facts, but we believe our stories as if they're true. So the first step, and I recommend you guys both start applying this, is what are the facts? If you can identify the facts and get by that ego-driven need to be right and to be heard, and say, okay, what do we actually want? What's the result we want here together? What do we really want? Because at the end of the day, do you guys want to be fighting with each other?
No.
Definitely.
No. So what's the result we want? And then pull back a step and go, is my story that I'm telling myself right now getting me there? Or is there another way? Because here's the fun thing. I just made up 2 stories about that piece of clothing. There's an infinite number of stories that could be created from that same situation. We have no idea. The dog could have grabbed it off of the bed and then just got bored with it and left it there. There's so many things. The story could be true. Maddy might have just dropped it and not cared. Like, there's so many different scenarios. And unless we can learn to communicate with the intention of getting that common result, then we'll just keep on each other's throats all the time, right? What about you, Karen? Are you more of a fight, flight, or freeze?
I'm everything these days.
Hey, that's honest. Yeah.
I hit a point and I stayed in bed all day. That was I needed to be away from everybody. I stayed in bed for the day. I kind of regrouped. And that's after, a month of dealing with all different types of issues. And, I have a mom, my mom, her grandma, she had cancer last year and she had pneumonia. So she's very susceptible. And Maddy wanted to see friends. And we thought, you know, she was allowed to see 2 friends because
Also, this was, keep in mind, this was the first week of quarantine, and like we no one had any idea what was actually happening. And like from what I knew and like what my friends were doing was like they were seeing like 1 or 2 people that were like, and that only those people.
they were in quarantine, like their families hadn't seen anybody. So we thought we were being safe, right?
Mhm.
And when my mom came over, she was terrified because she needed to see her friends, her 2 friends, or have them over. And so that caused a lot of issues in our house.
And but it was also like, yes, grandma was here and was really scared, but it was like I couldn't like read her mind. Like I never knew, like me not thinking anything of it, like I didn't know like how she felt. And like she never
Right.
told me that. And then after, I guess when she had left, like it caused like a lot of conflict.
Mm.
Like we were putting her at risk, and we felt terrible. Like we've been trying to sort through all this mess, but we feel terrible. And I feel terrible as a daughter to my mom, you know, that I let her down. And then I feel terrible for her, you know, so it's just this whole vicious, nasty
Oh,
cycle.
absolutely. And we are all hypersensitive right now because we're constantly on each other's nerves. I mean, I actually want to applaud you. There's a lot of stuff on the internet, you know, people saying, if you know you have this time now to do all the things you wanted, so if you're not accomplishing anything, then you didn't lack time, you lack self-discipline. And a lot of people are like, amen, preach it, because it's all about that pushing forward, being productive, being positive. But if we hold true to that grieving process, part of the human experience is being sad, it's being frustrated, it's being full of regret and remorse. And you know what, if you want to hide in bed for a day, go hide in bed for a day. Process, do what's honest for you. Don't get stuck there, but don't force yourself to, you know, okay, Maddie, you know, now you've got 6 hours days extra, why aren't you taking some free MIT courses or doing art or getting into shape or whatever else someone could be telling you to do? None of that matters, right? Like, do something for yourself, but allow yourself to have interruptions, and that's just part of who you are. In regards to your grandmother situation, not that this is going to help, but one of the interesting facts is the virus first became known to start spreading through Europe on December 25th. Right. So before it even became known, December 25th. Now, you guys are smiling because if you recall, that's when all of us were heading to Portugal together, which is in Europe. So chances are, and this is where Farah and I, my wife Farah, for those that don't know, we've netted out, and the way we've helped our mental state is we've accepted that we have the virus. And now how do we act accordingly? Right? Whether we're showing symptoms or not, we just accept the fact that we are in Europe on December 25th. And since then, I mean, we spent all that time with you, all that time with everybody we met. And then New Year's, you know, all that time with strangers. Then we come back, I'm running all these live events. And so I'm like, yep, I'm just going to accept that we have it. So now how do I act? And when we put that into perspective, I miss people too. I'm a huge hugger. I'm a huge social creature. You guys know I run a lot of live events and I'm missing it. But the moment I'm like, no, I have the virus, it helps me have perspective that, nope, I wouldn't do it even if I could. Right. And that's given us a unique perspective to be able to really adapt and push forward with what is normalizing, with how things are starting to pan out, and help us along that grief process to acceptance a little more quickly. Because I think that's what we're seeing is there's a lot of people that keep hoping we're going to go back to normal when there is no back to normal anymore. Like the longer this goes, those people will start going through the grief process anew, right? So it could be interesting. I mean, right now, the Canadian health minister only 2 days ago said that they're anticipating some form of quarantine, whether it's rolling quarantine or intermittent quarantine, for the next 9 to 12 months.
Yeah.
Right? 9 to 12 months. I know, Maddie. I know. Well, and I'm upset too, in a way, because I mean, even Toronto, we're all living roughly inside that area. Toronto has canceled all events till the end of July. Right? That's like or end of June. That's like half the summer gone when it's prime live event season. And we attend as well as host a lot of live events in the city. So we've had to shift our business model. We've had to shift the way we hang out with friends. I did an online Cards Against Humanity game last weekend. It was a lot of fun. Like, I reconnected with friends from all over the world. Some of them I hadn't seen in 10 years. And we had some strangers there. And there might have been some alcohol involved. And it was a lot of fun. So we're going to do it again. It was chaotic and whatever, but it was a good release, which is important.
Yeah.
What are you guys doing for structured routine?
I would say, okay, some mornings I'll wake up and like I'll be like, okay, today I'm getting like stuff done, and I'll like write down like what I'm gonna do for the day. Like I'll do my homework because now I have online school, and I'll write a workout, and sometimes I'll get to it, sometimes I won't, and like meal plans and stuff. But yeah, like it's more of like a day-to-day thing. Like I don't have like a whole week planned out or
Right. But is it roughly the same type of structure day to day?
um yeah.
No, that's great, because right now, more than ever, I mean, you know, your husband's an entrepreneur, much like myself. Him and I are very good friends. Hopefully, he's not upset that I didn't ask him to be on this call.
He's
Um,
okay.
I actually asked him 2 weeks ago and he never replied. So there you go.
Whatever.
Structure is important. Having a routine is important, especially now more than ever. So even if your routine's the same, here's the key pieces. Do your very best to wake up at the same time and go to bed at the same time, because that will help you have a consistent level of energy. It'll help you have a consistent level of emotional health. And this is for all of us, not just for Maddy. And it just helps you get into a normalized routine. So again, we don't know what the future is. We don't know, we can't go back to the past. So all we have control of is today. So structure today so that you're relatively doing the same things. Like if you have certain times at class, do you do your homework right after class? Do you take a break and then go to it? Be consistent with it, and you'll find that you'll just be happier overall. And all of us will be by doing those routines. You know, we can't go to the gym either. So I've downloaded an app. I've shared it with you, Maddy. We're doing that every single day. I am on week 3.5 without missing a single day, which is important because, you know, you got to keep your health up or else nothing else matters really.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
I do want to talk about schooling though. So I don't have kids and I've heard different people talk about different things. So Maddy, this is strictly you. Explain it to me. How does it work?
So I actually just started it this week. Like they just created like I guess like online modules. So some like I have some teachers a video and then we have questions to answer and like we submit it to them for marks. But some other classes like I know math especially is like I don't even think like my friend isn't even doing her math because the teacher's like just giving them a sheet and saying like do the homework, but they can't like learn that way. So
And
yeah. And I
how long are you spending each day in school?
not long. They're only doing 3 hours a week per class.
3 hours a week per class, and you have 4 classes?
Three.
3 classes, so 9 hours per week. Okay. And the homework assignments, how long does that take roughly?
Not too long. Like I would say like an hour.
Right. Okay. Fair enough. So this is where it's going to get fun, Karen. You said you were a teacher earlier, and we talked about Doug Ford and how you didn't really like him with the strikes. And I remember one of the big contention points while you were all striking was that, you know, he wanted to move everything to e-learning because it would be cost effective. Yeah, you're laughing, and yet look where we are a month later, right? And some people have said, "Oh, go ahead."
E-learning. It's not e-learning because e-learning's different. We're in an emergency learning situation. So it's not your typical expectation online, like with the older kids that can somewhat handle their e-learning. But right now we're all in just emergency learning because we're dealing with the emotional impact this is having on us students, the ability even cope and to be even able to concentrate to do work. And families are supporting members who are, you know, working outside the home right now in, you know, doctors, nurses, custodians, all the people who are our heroes right now who are, you know, having to work and be exposed to the virus. So it's not It's emergency learning, and it's hard because you're wanting kids to do the work, so and continue their learning, because they made so many gains this year. I know for my students, and I wanted them to continue on that path, but there's so many different variables right now that some kids just can't cope.
Right.
Some don't want to learn.
Well, yeah, because they're basically like, when you're doing e-learning, you're teaching yourself. Like, you don't have a teacher like there to tell you like what to do, and like that's what is like the hard part.
And we're like, for me, because I have some kids who can't, who have difficulty learning language and math, I can't be one-on-one with them on my computer where I can listen to them read, because our union is saying don't be put in a situation like that, because there's all these other things that can happen online. So it's really tricky to navigate this whole learning process.
Well, and much like we talked about, even with governmental process, helping with these different, loans to businesses and the personal amounts that they're giving to people, coming up with these policies on the fly is really challenging. Now, here's actually a perfect opportunity for us to practice some of those crucial conversation skills, because the story I hear you telling yourself is that it's emergency learning. It's emergency learning. Now, what's implied there is that it'll go back to normal, but we already established earlier that we can't go back to normal. So I'm going to look at facts. Here's some facts. In grocery stores, for a lot of those frontline workers, by the way, I had a nurse correct me. They're not frontline workers. They call themselves sacrificial workers. Yeah, it's kind of gloom and doom, but that's what they call themselves, because they're disposable, apparently. That's why they're still out there. That's how they feel. They're getting tired too. Yeah. So my sister, for example, works in a grocery store. They've put up, plastic barriers in every checkout. Any gas station or store you go to, they all have these plastic barriers. So companies are spending millions on these emergency measures to help protect people out in the front line. Now, let me ask you this question. Logic-wise, do you think if companies are spending millions of dollars putting these things in place, that as things normalize, they're going to spend more time and money removing them?
Yeah, that's a good question.
They won't. Why would they? Why would they not just make that part of the new normal? And I'll go back historically to World War II. So World War II was a lot like this. People were at home, they were quarantined, news came a little slower than it does today, et cetera, and the country was running out of money. And so to help fund the war effort, they introduced an emergency tax. And the emergency tax was to, even though it sucked because everybody had nothing, we all paid into it, because the idea was to get funding enough to get through the current situation, with the idea that it was a temporary emergency tax. Guess what? We've been paying tax ever since. It never went away. So my challenge for you is I don't know exactly what form it'll look like, but if we use both that same logic that you agreed to, then would it not make logical sense that as we've introduced now e-learning as a standard way of doing things, what makes you think that won't continue?
I think that this form of learning is just not practical. It is not in the best interests of our kids. They need the social interaction, they need the hands-on learning, and they need, in a lot of cases, somebody by their side guiding them, helping them each step of the way. So unless there's a way to do this online where it's safe for kids and teachers to do this type of learning, I just don't see how it's in their best interest.
So you brought up a couple of good points. So one point though, that actually, I wouldn't say works against the argument, because there's no argument, it's conversation. We all know what it's like in schools, especially high schools. I mean, there's police on site in a lot of schools, there's metal detectors, there's teachers are always concerned for their safety, all that kind of thing. That all goes away with e-learning. You are 100% safe. No one is going to physically assault you. So that's actually a mark in the pros column. But then you mentioned social interactions and how kids need to interact with each other. So if you talk with people that have done homeschooling, for example, a lot of homeschoolers that I have talked to over the last couple of weeks, and this isn't an attack on teachers, it's more of a difference of opinion on parenting. Because when, much like we just talked about with structuring your day, having boundaries, like for example, if Maddy says, I'm spending 4 hours in my room right now working on schooling, don't interrupt me, those boundaries need to be respected. And then Maddy also needs to know at the end of those 4 hours, she's no longer doing schoolwork, right? So you're creating that structure. A lot of homeschoolers, especially moms, say that's how the relationship is. During these hours, I am your teacher. And then outside of those hours, I'm your mother, I'm your friend, all those other things. And it's helped the kids actually develop stronger social structure skills because they learn how to respect the different roles that a single person can play. So there's been that interesting aspect. The final thing for you to consider, and this goes back to what Maddy was saying, is fundamentally at its core, and I know I'm opening up so many cans of worms here. This is fun. I'm excited. Keep track of all your counterpoints. Fundamentally, through the entire Industrial Revolution, the only thing that has not fundamentally changed is the small class, well, I won't even say small, classroom style teaching. Everything else is advanced, but this is still the same. Teacher in front of the room with a board and a bunch of kids, right? Now, Maddy says she's in school for 2 to 3 hours per class. What they've been saying, the naysayers to why we should go back to the traditional way of teaching, have said that this gives evidence to the fact that teachers spend about 2 to 3 hours per day actually teaching, and the other 4 to 6, whatever it is, depending on your school, the 4 to 5 to 6 hours just managing the kids, dealing with disruptions. And that if that's the truth of the situation, then we can actually help the teachers in many ways by providing tools such as online learning to help students focus quicker and get the skills they need. So I'm going to shut up and let you say everything you want to say.
But then,
Both of you.
but then kids, if they were at home doing e-learning, or some of their parents wouldn't be home, and they're young kids and they have to do online school, so like how would that work too? It's also a way of like giving the kids and the parents to go to work and the kids go to school, you know?
So here's the interesting thing on that one. I'm going to answer that one is it goes back to this conversation we've had. And this is where it's so challenging right now, because that idea, well, yeah, I mean, when this is all over, people are going to start going back to work, et cetera, but that's based on what was. Because again, to what we were saying about all these other measures put in place, the single greatest expense of large businesses is the real estate they rent. So now what's happening, companies like mine are teaching teams how to work remotely. And what we're already finding is stuff I've already known for years, is that the profitability goes higher because there's no commute. People actually work longer at home because there's no commute. They're finding that with a good remote work culture, people are becoming more productive. They don't have to wear pants for meetings. They can have little distractions and breaks. So it's no longer about working 9 to 5. It's about getting your tasks done. So
that's a bit different, because as an adult, you have accountability. You need to make money. There is all these different measures put in place that you are getting these tasks done. Kids, it's a whole different ballgame. You may have parents who academically have that mindset and can teach their kids. There are a lot of parents out there struggling right now. It's like when you'd have to teach your kid how to drive. It's right. It's crazy. I'm hearing, a lot of parents, I don't have the patience for this. I can't teach my kid this. So you have a lot of people out there who are struggling to try to get their kids to do the work. And you have parents who don't understand how to teach some of these lessons. And then you've got parents who are a little bit more laissez-faire about education and who may not have that parenting rule where they're ensuring their kids are allotted a certain amount of time to do their studies, to do their work. Oh, my kid doesn't want to do it. I'm not going to force them. So you have so many different attitudes and variables out there, and you're dealing with younger kids who don't have that accountability, because as teachers and parents, we make them accountable. We have to, we're training them to become an adult and have certain skills. So it's a whole different ball game, and you can't compare apples to oranges in that way.
So in some ways, I actually think it's apples to apples, and I'll explain why. I wanted to finish up that last point, though, is that the point I was making is after we do get through this and things normalize, not everyone might be going back to work. So as parents continue to work from home, even if it's on a part-time basis, then it still affords the opportunity for the children to be at home and learning, because this might be part of the new norm. It might be 4 days at home, 1 day at the office, instead of 4 days at the office.
What are they learning? Is that equitable?
Right. So now to that point, here's the thing. I agree with you, by the way. I'm just looking at interesting observations.
Yeah.
It's a lot less expensive, right? Which is the first thing. But I want to talk about apples to apples, as in comparing children and the way they are to adults and the way we are. One of the phrases that keeps coming up again and again, you both are on my Facebook. You probably saw the picture I posted not too long ago, a couple of days ago, and it was pictures of all the masks and all the gloves all over the ground, all the medical stuff that people are just throwing away. We're only a month into this, and already human being adults are showing just how worse than children we are in many, many ways.
Yeah.
And in fact, that goes back to the whole form of government, because if you think about it, government is the parents for us as adults. It is control mechanisms put in place because for whatever reason, human nature is not to do what you're told. So we have to have structures and boundaries and laws and rules, and we follow them. So at the end of the day, isn't that the exact same as what you just said as far as parenting? You're going to have some trouble adults. We have systems for those. You're going to have some good adults that excel. We have systems for those. So to your point, this could be the same as the employment income program, right? When someone is on employment income, they don't just simply get a check every month. They have to check into a government website. They have to provide proof that they've been looking for a job. There's all these different controls in place to keep them accountable. So it might be easy enough to keep the children accountable through online learning because everything's submitted online. You still need teachers. I'm not for self-study. Even in my business, I don't do self-study because I'll be honest with you, when I offer self-study programs for $99, people will sign up and buy it and then never do it, right? Facilitated online study is very popular in the past, even more popular now. But of course, the best is our one-to-one mentoring programs because that's when people really excel. So I see the differences here and I agree with you. But what I'm saying is there could be options. And for example, the parents, what if they tied it into your taxes? What if the child had to demonstrate a certain amount of hours each month and the parents actually had to fill out a form themselves based on the numbers that are in the system? And if they do not, then maybe they get a percentage taken off their taxes according to what they're massing. Like, I don't know the answer. I'm saying that we live in a world now where we fundamentally could create new control mechanisms that could at least introduce these types of elements. Where would the advantage be? One of the biggest complaints that you told me, Karen, from this recent teacher strike, it's not about money. It was never about money. It was about smaller classroom sizes and about the children actually getting their needs met, to your earlier point.
Right.
So what if you could take even the top 10 students in your class, people like Maddy, for example, who are great learners, highly intelligent, highly motivated, and willing to do it, and they pick it up naturally. And then that would give you the time to focus on those that are struggling. Would that be something that would be of interest?
Yeah, great question.
I stumped.
No, I just think that it's a human need for social interaction.
And like some kids may be living in, like, say, a toxic household, and school is their only way to get out.
And
Right.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's a brilliant point. I mean, and that's actually even a concern that the government has right now, because you've got people in abusive relationships, you've got people with mental health issues, and this quarantine is like, we think it's hard for us. It's even a lot more challenging for people struggling through those things. So I completely agree with you. But back to the first point, that need for social interaction. I agree. We're humans. We need to be connected. Yet at the same time, back to homeschooling, I've seen both sides of the fence. I've seen some kids that have grown up in homeschooling and have absolutely no social skills. They're what's considered sheltered. But by and large, nowadays, for the last decade or so, all the kids I've met that have been homeschooled are just as well adjusted, if not more so, than a lot of the traditional educational system kids that I've seen.
I
So
don't
let
know.
me
I
ask.
have to do research on that, Marcus.
Right. Well, yeah,
I
of course.
often get kids who were homeschooled,
They're awkward.
and well, socially, some of them can be awkward, and they're not meeting the Ontario curriculum guidelines. So when we do have students that finally enter the school stream, they are so far behind in our curriculum. And there's so many gaps. So there's that piece as well. Some people's
That's a concern.
homeschooling is very different from, like, I had a case where this boy was homeschooled and he was supposed to be in grade 2 and he did not know his alphabet. He did not know his sounds. So that's really concerning. So
I
the
agree.
homeschooling piece is just, there's just so many concerns I have. And, you know, as a social worker, I'm thinking too right now, some of the safest times for kids were at school, or where they'd have a meal, where they'd have a snack. And I can't imagine Children's Aid right now and how they're dealing with it and how they're meeting the needs of these kids in these homes. So it's also an outlet for kids who are in very unhappy, toxic homes, to be outside in a safe environment where there is structure available. And structure is so important for kids, and consistency. Structure and consistency, kids thrive on it. And in a school environment where we have kids that may not have that at home, you can see how well they thrive in a school environment where they know the expectations. They know if you do A, this is what's going to happen.
Right.
So, I mean, as many pros you can find for homeschooling, I think there's also the cons.
Oh, absolutely. And I love how it comes back to that topic we were talking about earlier about structure, right?
Yeah.
What I find interesting is you keep saying, you know, children thrive on that. But the very first thing we said is adults too, right now especially, have structure and consistency, right?
Yeah.
Because that's a human condition, not a child condition.
Yeah.
But here's the thing. I'm not proposing to get rid of traditional schooling by any means, but imagine even this. If you had an option, not even an option, if whatever gets worked out in the future, because I don't know what it looks like, but if as we normalize, if it becomes an additional tool in your arsenal, maybe it becomes teacher recommendation for whatever reason, you can be like, you know what? Yeah, actually, I think you'd do well with 12 hours of self-study at home each week. Some students could thrive like that, still get a partial social interaction. It would free up some of your time in the classroom, and we could leverage a lot of these technologies to push that educational system forward, making sure that it does meet those curriculum
But
requirements.
who's going to determine if that the students who can thrive in doing that
Right,
will
because then there's all new liability on the teachers.
can do it? And we know the kids that can do it. Like, you know what I
Well,
mean?
I know, but then, yeah, and then of course there's the politics, because there'll be the parents that are like, well, why don't you think my child can do it, right?
Yeah.
So I get it, and it wouldn't be perfect, but I truly believe for the longest time the education system has needed an overhaul. And what I know is going to happen is, in some way or form, this pandemic will be the excuse to implement change. Something's going to change. Don't know
Well,
what,
you
but
mentioned
something will.
before, you know, how a teacher stands at the front of the room. I know for my class, it is not that at all. Like, it's a very fluid learning experience for these students, where I'm not standing at the front of the room. I roam, I'm monitoring, I'm interacting, I'm doing one-on-one, small group work. And that's kind of my classroom experience.
Can I say something?
Yeah, yeah.
In my classrooms, like with the newer teachers I've noticed is like they're way more interactive. They get us to like get up and like do things as a group, and like even in like grade 12, like in my high school classes. But then there's like the older school teachers who literally like I've been doing the exact same thing since however long they've worked there, handing out the same tests and assignments, and like those are like the teachers that stand at the front of the classroom. But like I think the newer teachers are the ones like evolving and making it different and like more hands-on.
Which is a great point.
I have a kid who moaned and groaned every time I gave her language work. She needed to practice her writing skills. Oh, do I have to do this? I don't like it. You know, like the whole bit every time, no exception. I'd be like, yeah, we got to do it. Sit down. I'm going to check in with you in 2 minutes. And you better have a good sentence so that we can talk about it, right? And there's a lot of kids that I work with that need that. You know, I'm back in a second. You better motor on, okay, right? They need that, and
Agreed.
that's what I worry about is those kids that need the pushing and the shoving and the stop the whining. This is not a whine zone, right? You know, like where I'm all over them. This is what I'm worrying about. They're not getting that at home.
Right. I agree. And I think one of the funniest things I've shared, and I know you laughed at it, was there's a whole lot of parents about to find out that it wasn't the teacher at fault. Right. Because you're right. I mean, yeah, a lot of it comes from home. Now, to what Maddy said earlier about, you know, you've got some older teachers that have been teaching the same way since time began. There's another positive for actually leveraging more of these technologies, because those types of teachers would most likely leave than adapt. And that could be a good thing within, you know, 5-10 years. That could be a great thing. I already know that classrooms have changed in the sense of how they leverage technology. I have nieces that go to public school, in elementary school, and their classrooms, each one of them has a laptop while they're in the classroom to work on. Yeah. So how is that different than what you and I are doing right now via Zoom, right? So the components are there. The difference is right now it's supervised in person versus supervised virtually. I don't know. I think there's a middle ground somewhere. And to your point, who determines it and who qualifies? That's the same as any other government issue, right? I mean, we put age restrictions on getting driver's license. That didn't work after a while. So now it's graduated licensing to prove that you deserve it. That way it's standardized. You know, we have a criminal justice system that's constantly revising and revamping because people are finding all new ways to screw things up. So I think the education system could become a similar work in progress.
Yeah, it's about accountability, showing proof that you are able to take certain tasks on. And if you can do it, great. But we're talking about kids. We're not talking about adults. They haven't learned a lot of these scaffolding steps and skills that they need in their life to become adults who can do what we're doing, right? She's a young adult. These young kids, they really need these critical skills that are being taught, you know, in school.
Completely on that, we are 100% agreed. I fully believe children need all our nurturing. To your point, sometimes we have learned poorly and then we pass that on to our children or are incapable of teaching our children for whatever reason. Maddy, let me ask you this question. We talked earlier about being social. And sure, we're social at school in between classroom breaks. Is that your only form of being social, or do you go out after school and on weekends? And do you have a job where you can be social with other people you know?
Well, okay, so I would say, especially in classrooms, is a place to be social with kids. Like you're constantly talking with people and like interacting in like group work and stuff. That's how you get to know people. Like I've met a lot of my friends through classes and stuff. And lunch, lunches too. After school, not so much because everyone is mostly going to their jobs or needs to go home and do their homework, I would say. But like on weekends especially is a super social time too.
Okay. So I want to circle back just really quick. A thought popped up from before when we were talking about homeschooling and social adjustment. I mean, there's still, after school programs, kids can be in dance classes or sporting classes or whatever these things. So even for the homeschoolers, on an educational level, that I actually, that made me really sad when you were talking about that kid that was so far behind and you had to work with them. To me, that's unacceptable from any homeschooling parent. But on the social point of view, I mean, if they're still out and living with their children, if they're still taking them out and engaging in other things like team sports or team activities, then I do think there would still be some sense of social development. But again, if a parent is homeschooling and the child's never leaving the house ever, then they have no social adjustment skills whatsoever. And that to me is tragic.
Yeah.
So you were saying, Maddie?
Whether at like school, like public school or high school, you can join a team and you can be active. Like who knows if you're homeschooled, like you're not like forced to be active too as well.
Yeah, fair enough. I mean, actually, there's a homeschooling friend of mine. I think you would really enjoy her. Their school actually meets outdoors. They are outdoors all day learning, but in a natural environment. So they're always physically active and they're always breathing fresh air. And in some ways, I can see that working better. Now, again, I don't know what their curriculum standards are or anything like that. But I do have a genuinely new appreciation for you, Karen. I never realized before, because I know you have 3 degrees, but tying in some of the different educations and experiences you have from social work into the teaching, I think that is such an invaluable, beautiful insight. So thank you for helping me be a little more open to seeing both perspectives, not just strictly from, an educational system point of view, but how it actually matters and affects the children. So that's really important because, as you know, I'm not a parent. I just occasionally like to hang out with kids because they talk at my level. So that's a lot of fun. But yeah. So what is next for you guys then after today? What is your structure look like right now today?
Well, it's holiday weekend.
Oh, is it? Okay. I thought it was just another part of the 100 days of, what month are we in?
Oh, don't put it like that.
No, we're doing the holiday weekend. So
we're gonna play Settlers of Catan.
Yeah.
And
Nice.
I've been cooking a lot. That's actually something in this quarantine that I've been some master chef. I have.
Awesome.
You cooked twice.
No, but I'm really
So it looks like at least the laughter is alive and well, and that's important. Something that I've realized, and if you don't have this, I'm sure you do, but this is more for people that are watching and listening. It's so critical as part of your daily structure to incorporate fun.
Yeah.
You have to have fun. Fun is such a healthy part of our lives. Do not neglect fun. For me, it's the opposite. It's not so much the cooking all day, every day. It's the eating all day, every day that's been the challenge.
That's a huge problem.
You know what? Something was following me the other day, and I realized it was my ass.
Okay, that was good. I might use that one. That was pretty funny. Wow. So yeah. So I'm going to wrap up on that. But thank you so much for your time. I miss you guys a lot. You guys are like family to me. Maybe we can do.
Honey's been watching. Honey's
Hey,
been
Penny.
watching. Hey.
There you go. Hey,
And
Penny. That's cute. So have a wonderful Easter. Think of us. Farah sends her love. She came down and made sure that I send you guys our love. Maybe we could all get together for like a virtual games night sometime in the near future.
Yeah, we'll kick butt in Scrabble.
I will find online Scrabble then, and we'll have to, again, have some alcohol involved.
Yes.
Awesome. So give my love to the rest of the fam. Let them know that you guys are actually in my thoughts daily. I'm still holding out hope, Maddie, that we're going to get to do our Mud Hero together in August.
I hope so.
Yeah, hasn't been canceled yet. And Karen, thank you. Thank you for the laughs. Thank you for the brilliant insights. And thank you just for being you. You are a wonderful human being, and I genuinely appreciate it. So,
We love you, Marcus.
love you too.
What you're doing.
Thank you. Bye for now.